Dude, the one and only Ben Greenfield. What is going on, man?
Not much. I was telling you, I just got done making cheesecake.
Well, I was going to ask you what you had for breakfast today.
Well, what did I have for breakfast? I had a raw liver smoothie for breakfast. That's what I do a lot. It's like freaking lifeblood. I soak liver, like really good, clean, grass-finished liver in kefir for about 24 hours. And kefir, it's kind of like fermented milk. You could use buttermilk for this too, but the enzymes in it kind of break down the collagenous fibers and some of the chewier bits in liver, or works really well for heart too. And then you rinse it and rinse the kefir off after it's sat for about 24 hours. Then you pulverize it in a blender. And then you get those little silicone molds. I use like the little Reese's peanut butter cup size molds. So don't come over to my house and eat the Reese's peanut butter cups unless you want a little surprise. But I put it in the freezer and freeze them. Then I just put them in a bag and keep them in the freezer. And I toss like 4 of those in my morning smoothie with like a little ice, little bone broth, some salt. Usually I'll put like a little stevia in there. Typically a couple scoops of protein powder, colostrum. And then I blend that all up and just top it with like cacao nibs or bee pollen or whatever. And it's pretty much, depending on the flavor of protein that I use, whether vanilla or chocolate, tastes like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream. Like I have buddies come over to my house and try it, and they're like, seriously, that says liver in it? It's like when you sneak vegetables into your kid's spaghetti sauce, and it's pretty good. So that's what I'll have like typically 6 out of 7 mornings of the week, and then there's one morning where I'm taking my kids out to waffles or brunch or making eggs or whatever. But yeah. Oh, and then the cheesecake thing, that wasn't for breakfast. Do you know the folks at Keto Brick? They do like those 1,000 calorie bricks. Okay, so they told me, or I read this, I forget, but you can melt the bricks and make like a crust out of them if you mix a little almond flour or coconut flour and some crumbled up nuts and a little salt, a little vanilla extract, and then you bake that in like a pie pan to make a crust. Then you take another keto brick, and for people who haven't seen these, they literally are a brick. They're like 1,000 calories a brick, but the base is coconut butter, so they melt down pretty well on the stovetop. And so then you take another keto brick and melt that down with coconut cream and with a little bit more vanilla, a little stevia, a little salt, and a couple more eggs, and you pour that in for your filler, and then you bake it. And I have this beautiful cheesecake in the refrigerator right now. I'm going to dive into it tonight. I've never done this before, but I use the chocolate peanut butter flavored keto bricks, and so it's just like collagen and coconut butter and all this good stuff. So it should be pretty tasty, or I'm gonna have explosive diarrhea tomorrow morning. We'll see.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? At least it's like a gut reset. If so, I mean, you got a glass half empty, glass half full. How you want to look at it? I popped the link down below for a company called House of Macadamia if you want to try them out. They've got really awesome macadamia nuts that are grown right in South Africa, and then they are packaged and handled and everything literally less than an hour away from where they are harvested. So they support all the local farmers there, just a really good brand. But as far as flavor is concerned, their macadamia nuts are top notch. Plus they have macadamia nut bars where the first ingredient is literally macadamia nuts. You're not going to find bars like that anywhere else. So their first ingredient is literal macadamia nuts. And additionally, they have macadamia nut oils, and they've got some other really cool products coming out. So definitely recommend you check them out. They are a sponsor on this channel, but because of that, there's a 20% off discount link. So in the top line of the description, just beneath this video, there's a 20% off link.
Plus, with any purchase using that link, a free 20-ounce bottle of cold-pressed macadamia nut oil. Literally the only cold-pressed macadamia nut oil that I know of that's on the market. And you're getting one completely free if you just use that link down below. There's no catches, it's just to get the word out there.
Yeah, and I think coconut butter is totally overrated, or underrated, excuse me. Like, it's just like that stuff is, whenever people are looking for an alternative and they're always looking at almond butter and whatnot, I'm like, just like, you guys are forgetting coconut butter here. Like, this stuff is so
and
epic.
then I'm not one of those like total like fat bomb keto guys, but I do like low sugar desserts, like flavor with stevia or monk fruit or allulose or whatever. They don't exhaust me with that post dessert hypoglycemic drop. And so even though I'm not carb phobic or anything like that, and I'm definitely not like slamming sticks of butter all day long, the idea of melting down a couple of keto bricks to make cheesecake just seemed like a sexy thing.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, I think we share the same sentiments towards, fat is an interesting thing. It's like,
Yeah.
When you're in the low carb echo chamber, sometimes it's easy to think, okay, well, yeah, fat is fuel. Got to crank the fat up as much as I can. It's and it's over the years learned. Yeah. Even if you're in ketosis, it's like or don't chase ketones, chase results, right? Don't try to drive your ketone values up.
Yeah. Yeah, when these days you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. Like I'm more of like a Mediterranean fats kind of guy. Like I'll do a lot of avocados and olive, ton of extra virgin olive oil, a lot of fatty fish, some seeds, some nuts. Like that's kind of my style of fat. Because these days with beta hydroxybutyrate and 1,3-butane-diol and ketone esters, I'm not a huge fan of ketone salts just because of the salts. But you can get that same physiologic state that you might be looking for from a stick of butter or like a can of coconut cream or coconut butter or whatever by just having some of the ketones, and then have more of your fats be kind of like the Mediterranean style omega-3s, with some of the omega-7s and 9s and 6s. And I feel a lot better with that. And I think it's just less throughput for the liver and the gallbladder, less bile production. You get a lot less like the fatty, greasy stool, and to me, it just seems more natural. And again, you can shift your physiologic state these days using a little bit of science. Granted, it's spendy liquid ketone science, but you can do it without slamming fats all day long.
Preaching to the choir, man. I had 32 grams of a straight Delta G ketone ester about an hour before this. So it's,
there you go.
And the thing is, we could go down a different rabbit hole with that, but it's so intriguing, especially once you've done the time of really kind of getting that mitochondrial state shift over, for years and years and years like you and I have. It's like our bodies preferentially will run on whatever we prime it for at this particular point, and it's like, so it's nice to have that luxury. I don't need to be straining my gallbladder. I don't need to put the strain on, enzymatic activity within my body by cramming a bunch of fats if I don't need to. Granted, when I want the fats, it's because I actually want the fats. It's not because I'm cramming them just to get that particular output or particular capacity. But
it's a fatabolic mexicity, that or metabolic flexibility. One of the two. I don't know.
So how long after you woke up? That's how it works. How long after you woke up did you have the smoothie?
I'm not super duper picky about it, but usually, well, I guess maybe we should backpedal if we're talking morning routines. But usually I get up and do all my foofy bathroom stuff, wash my face, and do coconut oil pulling and tongue scraping and all that fun stuff, and then I head downstairs, and I'm usually up about like 4:30, 4:45, right in there. And so I've got the first couple hours of the day to myself, and I typically will have just a giant glass of water. I'll usually add minerals to it, some vinegar, some vitamin C. I like to put hydrogen tablets in it, so it's just like this giant glass mason jar. My whole house filtration system is all like double carbon block structured Vortist water, so it's like really good water either way. But I add some goodies to that, suck that down, and then I'll pour some more water into a pot, and I bounce all over the place. Like some mornings I'm making a coffee. I like that one company, My Cacao. They said you like broken down cacao nibs and cacao shells. I like that for just like drinking cacao. I like the Four Sigmatic mushroom stuff. Just whatever I'm kind of feeling, like intuitively when I get up. And so I make I start to heat up the water for that and kind of get everything prepared, drink my giant glass of water, and then I head down to what I call my Zen den in my basement, and I go down there. I listen, typically. I like to listen instead of read in the morning, but I listen to a meditation or a Bible reading. Like right now I'm using the Bible in one ear app. I almost said the Bible in one ear. It's the Bible in two ears in 1 year. And I listen to that, and then I'll shift to typically another devotional or sermon. Like I subscribe to all these Sermon of the Days podcasts. So basically my philosophy is the first thing I kind of feed myself with is I feed my spirit in the morning as far as digestion of information. But while I'm doing that, I do some rebounding up and down on the trampoline. I do some foam rolling, hit the lacrosse balls, use some of those vibrating guns. I just basically carve out 15 minutes of me time just for body work while I'm listening to my stuff. And then I go back upstairs and I get my coffee or my cacao tea or my mushroom tea or whatever. And I grab that and I head into my office. So I'm usually in my office by about 5:45 or so. And I don't put any calories into the drink, so I wouldn't count that as breakfast. You know, I like to put a little salt in there, sometimes some stevia. That's about it. And first 30 minutes or so of the day, my light setup in the office is just all red light. So I typically am still wearing my blue light blocking glasses. I don't have any lights in my office. I have a couple of these like red light panels. So my philosophy is I'm not going to go hike up the hill behind my house and stare at the sun. Like I kind of got to get down to business and get shit done. So I just simulate a giant, gorgeous sunrise in my office with all this red light. And so the first half hour or so of the day, I'm either writing or recording, you know, eating the frog, so to speak, getting that hard thing done with first. And then I'll flip the red lights off and then flip the big blue overhead lights on. So now it's daytime. I get a bigger cortisol awakening response. The caffeine or whatever's in the tea or the cacao is kind of starting to hit my system. And typically I go for another, depending on how early I've gotten up, another 45 to 60 minutes of work. And again, it's just the deep work stuff, the articles. This morning, right now I'm recording the audio version of my new parenting book. So like this morning, it was just a couple of 30-minute audio sessions of recording. I just got done writing my next cookbook. And so the past month or so, it's just been all cookbook recipes, editing, etc. You know, that time to work, you know how it goes, Thomas, when nobody's going to bug in. You're not expected to be checking emails or checking text messages. So there's no guilt factor about having all that off. And then after that, typically the family is stirring. I can hear footsteps upstairs and dogs barking and everything like that. So I go upstairs and I gather the whole family. And we've been doing this since my sons were 8 years old. We have family meditation, family prayer, family Bible time, sometimes a family song, family huddle. Everybody gets on the same page. You know, what are we all doing today? What's for dinner? Who's contributing what? You know, what activities do my sons have? They're unschooled, so they typically are involved in all the experience all day long that either mom or me or their educational coordinator is driving them to. But we have this really big family time in the morning. That's typically right about 7:30. And then when that ends, I go and take a poop and head out to the gym. So I'll hit the gym from about like 8:15 till 9:15 or so. These days, after every single workout, I film a motivational video. Hop in the hot tub or the cold pool. And so I'm usually out of the gym by 9:30 or so. And typically sitting down to that raw liver smoothie, long answer to your question, I know, at about like 9:45, 10. And that works out perfect because I run my company virtually and we have our team company huddles at 9:45. So like my goal is be diving into my smoothie right about then while I'm hopping on the company call.
Nice, man. And then what is the next length of time between that meal or smoothie and your next meal?
Oh, I usually have lunch around like 2, somewhere around there. So usually I'm done with breakfast like 10:15, and lunch is typically like a light salad. I use a lot of like non-calorie dense but pretty nutrient dense puree. So I'll do like pureed pumpkin, chia seed gel, sea moss gel, these little like baby food packets from this company called Serenity Baby Foods that are just like squirtable, like pureed baby food. And I'll just do like that with a little bit of vegetables, some leftover meat, whatever from the night before, maybe some seeds or nuts or olive oil. But lunch is kind of like, I don't take a big lunch, but usually during lunch I'm just banging out some extra emails and things like that. And then, lunch is not that big of a deal. It's just whatever I happen to grab from the fridge, and most of it looks like a giant pile of baby food, or what my wife says is cat throw up. But
yeah,
whatever.
No, I'm very, very, very similar. Serenity Foods is awesome, by the way, but also, lunch it's usually a hodgepodge of different crap for me too. It's like, it's kind
of like empty out. I treat lunch as like the garbage disposal, where I'm just emptying out the fridge of whatever, and I really do save most of my carbs for the end of the day. I just feel good from an energy stability standpoint. So it's still mostly vegetables and fats and proteins.
And we're going to do a separate video on nighttime routine, which I think we can dive into that, because you and I are of the same vein there. We're contrary to, people suggesting, you should not have carbs in the evening. I mean, for a multitude of reasons, ranging from sleep, ranging to stability. It all depends on
Yeah.
the person, which we'll talk about. I mean, so people are probably wondering, wait a minute, I thought you're not supposed to have carbs at night. Huberman says don't have carbs
we
at
can
night.
talk about that, yeah, for sure.
We could go through. We'll save that for the other video.
Okay. Okay.
But coming back to morning for just a second, you mentioned something that I haven't addressed on my channel, but over the last year has been insanely interesting to me, and that's CMOS. Just can you give like a 60-second overhead view of kind of the benefits of CMOS? Because that stuff is pretty wicked cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert on CMOS, Thomas. I'm not going to pretend to be, but it's pretty high in minerals. It's got a lot of insoluble fiber in it. It seems to be pretty nourishing to the gut. When I get it from Akasha, which is like this superfoods company, I either get it jarred up already in gel-like format, or they'll actually send the actual CMOS, and you typically soak that in water and then just pulverize it in a blender. But it's just like, it's the texture of not quite jello. It's got a little bit of a gelatinous content. I mean, there's actually a really great book called Quench, and it's about the gel-like structure of water. I mean, water can be a liquid, it can be a solid, it can be a vapor, but in your cells and in many fruits and produce and vegetables and stuff like CMOS gel or chia seed slurry or what have you, it's actually in a gel-like format, and that tends to be extremely hydrating. So it's kind of like a lot of people drink structured water and say they get more hydrated. It's kind of along those lines. So it's just, and it fills you up pretty quick with almost no calories.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. I've noticed mainly, especially if I'm coming off of a longer fast or anything over 20 hours, I definitely find just a gut soothing effect. I mean, purely anecdotal at that rate. And I'm not going to try to make some crazy claim on it, but it's the stuff feels good. Something about it feels good. Something about it feels right. The trace mineralization that I'm getting out of it. Especially if I'm doing a lot of fasting, which, these days I'm really only, fasting a couple days a week. I just try to keep it kind of an anomaly.
Kind of gives you that same feeling as you get when you like kind of scrape all the gelatinous top off of bone broth. It's kind of similar to that, but it's vegetable based.
Are you doing any like adaptogens or anything like that in the morning right now?
Let me think. Well, I guess mushrooms, like, if I'm using like that 4-sigmatic 10 mushroom blend powder, that's obviously adaptogenic. A lot of times, actually, after lunch, I like to take a siesta or do like a quick yoga nidra session, or hop in I have one of those soft shell hyperbaric chambers where I can like zip myself up and I'm cut off from the world. Nobody can bug me for like a half hour after lunch. So I do like reishi. I actually have a packet of reishi. Like a lot of times with lunch, I pour a mug of bone broth and I'll have that on the side with my salad. I like to sprinkle a little salt, little reishi in there, and then my buddy, Dr. Thomas Cowan, has all these like pulverized heirloom vegetable powders that he ships out in these Miron glass jars, just like super high quality. And I'll typically just pick whatever, ashitaba or low oxalate greens or beet or turmeric or whatever, stir that into the bone broth. But yeah, I actually really like reishi because it kind of seems to settle me down, but I'm not groggy after I crash out after lunch for a half hour. So yeah, that would be probably the main adaptogen that I use, although probably the same thing happens to you. Companies are always sending me stuff. And a couple of weeks ago, somebody sent me black maca mixed with ashwagandha. And I've taken that a few times. And the main thing I've noticed is it makes me horny. Like, I've figured out if I take that at like 4 or 5 p.m., I just kind of want it after dinner, which is kind of nice. And technically that's an adaptogen, both maca and ashwagandha. But I find that one seems to like pick me up and not settle me down like reishi does.
Yeah, does it no issues with sleep as a result of it, or no?
No, not really. No, I mean, before bed I'm still using, I use my own product, Keon Sleep. I usually use about 60 milligrams or so of CBD. If I'm traveling, I throw a little melatonin into the mix. So I'm taking some stuff to settle me down at night anyways. And usually these days I'll use like breath prayer or just like a 4-7-8 breath to settle down. But breath prayer is pretty cool. Like if you look at like the ancient desert church fathers and mothers, they had this one prayer called the Jesus prayer where you just breathe in and you say, "Oh Lord Jesus Christ," and you breathe out. You say, "Have mercy on me." And for some reason, that one just like works for me. I just breathe in. It's almost like magic. And breathe out, and I'm out doing that. I still
Interesting.
I still put the eye mask on. I'm a mouth taper these days. I resisted for a really long time, but I kind of like it. If anything, it keeps you from waking up and feeling like you want a midnight snack because your mouth is taped shut. So I do a few things for sleep. I know we're going to talk about evening routine.
Are you doing any mouth taping with any exercise at all, or are you not doing that yet?
Kind of. I have a few different breath resistance devices that I'll put in if I'm doing cardio. And so the one that I like, well, there's actually two that I like. They're probably the ones I use the most. If I'm walking, I use one called the Relaxator, which is by Anders Olsen. And it resists how much you can breathe out through your mouth. Kind of looks like a little whistle. So with your whole walk, you got to breathe in through your nose. And then when you breathe out, there's resistance. So you're getting some inspiratory and expiratory muscle training and diaphragmatic training. And it just like hangs around your neck like a whistle. And it's kind of small and easily fits in my pocket. So I like that one if I'm just going out on a walk and I don't have to be talking on the phone or anything like that. But in the gym, yeah, when I'm doing cardio, I like this thing called a Nest Sport, N-E-S Sport. Simple little cheapo plastic device, same concept. It's impossible to inhale through your mouth, but you can exhale through your mouth against the resistance setting that you've chosen. So when I'm training, I'm breathing in through my nose and then out against resistance, which I actually think is a better workout for your inspiratory and expiratory muscles and diaphragm than breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. Right. So that's the way I like to do things as far as the breathing during a workout. And the only thing I'll do with breathing during a workout is I've got the other thing out by my bike is one of those oxygen concentrators. So I can go like hypoxia, hyperoxia. It's called exercise with oxygen training. And man, you feel amazing after you do a session like that. So that's kind of a cool way.
What brand is that? Because I've used LiveO2 before. Kind of messed around with that one, and just go hyperoxic and then go after my training. So I'm really into, that's kind of my new thing. I don't know if you know Dr. Scott Scher. I'm just become very, very interested in just the contrast therapies of going very hypoxic and very hyperoxic. And I live in Tahoe most of the time, so a lot of the time I'm at 7,000 feet anyway. So going hyperoxic when I'm at altitude can actually have a kind of backfire on you, because you kind of end up resistant, especially within the first month of coming back up there. That's the problem I tend to bounce back and forth from sea level to altitude, which has good effects, similar to, you could almost call it like metabolic flexibility, but hyperoxic flexibility, like the ability to transition back and forth. You can sort of develop some adaptation to that. So I've used like the LiveO2. What brand do you use for an oxygen concentrator?
Well, I use the LiveO2 also, and I like that you can flip it back and forth from hypoxia to hyperoxia. I like to do my recoveries in hypoxia, and then as soon as I do a sprint, I switch it to hyperoxia, so I'm saturating the muscles with oxygen. But one thing I learned when I was down in Miami a few weeks ago with Gary Brecka. Did you run into him at all when you were in Miami?
I know who he is. I've never met him personally.
So Gary's got one cool protocol. It kind of made sense when he explained to me, but I hadn't thought about it before. Is you start, if you have access to PEMF, like a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy session on a mat, or you could go outside and just like be barefoot or grounding or earthing and get a similar effect, but it's not as powerful. But basically what you're doing there is you're essentially exercising the cell membrane, right? You're opening and closing channels in the cell membrane via the pulse frequency. And so that's step one. And then step two, you do the exercise with oxygen therapy, because you're able to uptake way more oxygen after you do the PEMF. Well then, once you're in that state and you're saturated with oxygen, you can get a more excitatory effect from the oxygen and more ATP production if you get exposed to infrared light. So after that, if you want to go the au naturel route, you go out in sunlight, or if you want to blast yourself, you do like one of the red light panels or red light beds, and you basically are hyperoxygenating yourself and amping up ATP production and mitochondrial proliferation. So it's a 1, 2, 3 step process. You do PEMF or earthing and grounding, then you do your hyperoxia, and then you do red light therapy. And he does that with a lot of his patients and his clients and sees some pretty good results. And I did it a few times when I was at his house and felt fantastic afterwards as far as energy levels. And so I've kind of kept that up. Like in the morning, I'll do PEMF on the mornings that I'm going to go out and do the LiveO2. And then I always finish by getting out in the sunshine or going back under the red lights.
That's a really interesting thing. So I wonder if you had to wrap your head around a almost budget way for someone to do that, I guess in theory you could still kind of do it by just, You can still get relatively inexpensive PMF mats. They're not maybe the best, but you can still, that probably might, or simply go outside and ground a little bit. Like I said, not going to get the same effect. Then I guess it
really,
would be,
dude, you could just go for an outside walk, barefoot, in the sunshine with a breath resistance device, like a relaxator or something like that, and go between hypoxia and hyperoxia and get that same effect. And if you wanted to amp up kind of the photosynthetic properties of the photons of light, you mentioned Scott Scher, and you could take methylene blue prior, or the other two that will work pretty well for the interaction with melanin and the cytochrome pathways to produce extra ATP under sunlight or under red light are Shilajit or chlorella. So you could do like methylene blue, Shilajit, or chlorella, slip off your shoes, go for a walk in the sunshine, and play with your breath while you're doing it.
That's definitely a budget way to do it. That's perfect. So if you had to give like 3 takeaways for, I don't know, let's just call them a regular Joe. I know no one really wants to be considered a regular Joe, but 3 takeaways as far as morning routine that are maybe outside of the typical sphere of what we're hearing right now blasted on the internet. I love Andrew Huberman, love all that. I'm just getting a little tired of everyone kind of regurgitating the same thing. You and I have always marched to the beat of a different drum a little bit.
Yeah.
So when a lot of people go one direction, I tend to say that's my cue to go the other direction. Not saying that where the masses go is always bad. It's definitely not the case. But I always like to hear new, interesting things that people could do that might give them just that extra little edge or just that state change that they need.
Okay. When you wake up, you're in a state of theta brainwave production. You have a high state of creative neuroplasticity. And so anything related to either spiritual activities, creative activities, musical activities, etc., assuming you're not blasting yourself with light and phones and caffeine right when you get up, you do have a window to do some pretty cool things. And so that's why I really like carving out that quiet morning time for some of the deep spiritual work. And I've even experimented with doing my guitar lesson, my guitar practice during that time, with headphones, plugging it into the amp, putting the headphones in. And there's something weird about just doing that creative stuff when you're kind of like half dead, half awake, one foot in the spiritual world, one foot in the physical world. But it's due to that amped up theta brainwave production. So if you're not yet doing even like breath work, meditation, devotions, Bible reading, prayer, music, anything like that in the morning, I mean, that's a must, because it's the only time you have that window. I mean, it's gone the rest of the day. Theoretically, if you're using like some light sound stimulation machine like the Brain Tap or like a biocharger or something like that, you can set it in theta mode and kind of get yourself back into that zone, but it's never quite the same. So I'd make sure that you do that. I also will, when I get up, like I mentioned, a lot of people wear the blue light blocking glasses at night. I wear them in the morning, and I'll wear them for the first hour that I get up, and then I just have a cheapo, like $10 Amazon headlamp that's a red light headlamp on my nightstand. So my entire first hour of the day, when I'm preparing the coffee, doing the stretching, walking around, whatever, it's all under red light. So I'm getting almost no light exposure. And a lot of people know that, but that's another thing to actually do it. I mean, all the way down to like iris on the computer, shifted into red light mode. So it just really, really helps you ease yourself into the day. Keeps you from getting a little bit tired and groggy later on. I won't say cortisol awakening response, because I think that's something Huberman says a lot, and apparently that annoys you. So I won't.
No. Yeah. Huberman and I are buddies. We've worked on stuff on the Department of Defense side. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say worked together, but simultaneously.
Yeah.
And no, that's not my point. My point is simply that stuff that hasn't been talked about ad nauseum right now, because it's just it's everywhere.
The last thing, I mean, I realize it's kind of like more family oriented. Maybe it's top of mind for me because of the parenting book or whatever, but like having that team huddle, we also do it at night. We can talk about the evening routine later, but having a team huddle for your family, or if you're just married, with your husband or with your wife, it's really, really cool to be able to get the whole family on the same page. And even if you're like ships passing in the night the rest of the day, the entire day goes way more smooth. We finish up with a big hug, so everybody's just getting flooded with oxytocin. And, I think that for me, like, I'm the spiritual leader of the home. If I don't call it, it doesn't happen. But everybody knows, like 7:30, whatever you're up to, you're dropping everything, and we're in the living room or in the backyard, sitting in a lotus position, dropping into meditation, having a family meeting, and finishing with a big hug. And it's just like, it's kind of like a glue that holds our family together, 7 days a week. So that's another one that I think is super important.
Oftentimes, these morning routines end up becoming so just enveloping of the entire morning that people end up feeling such a selfish component of them. So for example, I'll use myself, I still like to train early in the morning. It's part of who I am, but I also understand that when I do that, I sacrifice a lot of my creative time and I sacrifice a lot of close time with my family. So since then, that's changed. Not to mention, I actually find that I work out a little bit better if I'm awake for a couple of hours first. I was also finding that simply like having caffeine, if I was rolling out of bed and training hard, it was this same response every morning where my adrenaline would spike in sort of an anticipatory fashion that I didn't really like. It didn't feel great. It was popping me out of those theta waves. It was like I was just boom, ready to go. And there's always that dad guilt, that feeling of like, oh, I'm doing something for myself too much. It's going too far. My morning routine is just all encompassing. And I think simply by setting the stage, even if it's just 5 minutes or 10 minutes with your entire family, in a lot of ways, it gives you a license to take that other time for yourself a little bit more guilt-free too, because you've set the tone. As you said, you're the spiritual leader of your household, and whoever the leader is in that sense at the home, it is their responsibility to call that. And I just think that's a really, really good bit of advice. And one other thing that I practice too, I like to meditate. I like to do my spiritual work first thing in the morning as well. And I also like to do it when I am in very different brain states, simply so that I can feel the contrast between the two. So exactly what you mentioned is when you do a lot of meditation work, it's so interesting. In a lot of ways, it's, for lack of a better term, easier to meditate in the morning. But what is easier? That's kind of a relative term that doesn't really apply in some ways. I find that I can get into that zone, but I also like meditating after I've had caffeine because it feels more like a discipline and more like a challenge, which I embrace in a different way. So I encourage people to try different mindfulness practices throughout different states of the day and don't get so locked into only doing it at one time. Experiment different ones for different potential effects.
I'm right on board with you. Like sometimes when I travel, I'm super busy and I don't get a chance to hit the gym till after dinner, like 8. And, you go and you're like, and then there's a bunch of people there and you're like, oh, people actually do work out at night. I just don't do it. And yeah, it's a totally different feeling. You don't sleep that well afterwards, but I think occasionally just throwing, metabolic or mental curveballs at your body like that is really, really good for just overall physical and mental plasticity.
I agree, man. Well, we'll end this one and we'll do the a nighttime routine video that's going to come out here shortly. I've linked out to your newer book, Boundless Parenting, which is very interesting. Ben and I both unschool our kids, which is in the colloquial sense, it's homeschooling, but it goes a lot deeper than that. So I'm very interested to see your book. I'd love to get a copy myself and check it out. So I popped that link down below. And Ben, I think pretty much everyone knows where to find you, but I'll let you end on that real quick.
Oh, it's bengreenfieldlife.com. It's a good spot.
Beautiful. Right. Well, as always, man, it's a pleasure. And everyone else, I will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Thomas.